Hey, I'm joined with JT at Hardy_Reef. How are you, man?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I have been an admirer of your tank for some time. Your Instagram is pretty nuts. The tank behind you is amazing.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. So, why don't you tell me about your beginning? How did you first fall into this reef keeping madness?
This is a good one. So, like a lot of other people, I started in freshwater. As a teenager, I kept African cichlids, which kind of started from my youngest sister getting an aquarium, and me as the older brother or middle brother being told, "Hey, make sure that these fish survive." Right. So then that kind of turned into a passion for me, and I adapted a little 20-gallon goldfish tank into a 55-gallon African cichlid aquarium. And then in 2018, my fiance at the time moved in with me, and I was just getting involved in my law enforcement career. And she knew that I had this passion for keeping aquariums as a younger man, and paved the way to getting a small saltwater system to kind of live out that childhood dream of having saltwater tank.
Okay, and by small, what is that?
So I started with the Red Sea E260, which is their all-in-one. I think it was like a 40-gallon-ish water volume. It was a lot easier to move. We were living in a duplex at the time, so it was just kind of, that was the entry point, was let's try to figure out how to reef and work with this little 45-gallon tank or whatever it was.
Wow. Was she involved?
So she is very supportive. She herself, like, she doesn't do any of the maintenance. She kind of keeps a hands-off approach. She enjoys looking at it now after we've gotten through some trials and tribulations and figured it out. But I mean, she's my wife now. She's great. She's very supportive of the whole thing.
That's good because that's important for sure.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I'm very lucky, and I know how lucky I am for that support.
My wife, she wasn't on board at first, but she kind of grew to love it. It's like moving art in her from her perspective. So she's come around. And now my son is obsessed with ocean life.
Perfect.
He's 3 and I don't honestly know where he got it from and if it's genetic, I guess. But so yeah, so we're in full support. I'm about to start. I've got a 180 that I'm gonna
Oh,
build over
very
the next
cool.
year. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that struck me about yours is the room divider, peninsula look.
Yeah, so this is it's a Cade 1500 Peninsula. It's the S2. They just dropped. They're about to drop the S3, but this is the S2 model that they've had out for years.
Okay, how many gallons is that?
So in total, it's 210. There's 178 up in the display, and there's 32 in the sump.
Oh, wow. Okay. So from the Red Sea, which you said was about 40 to 45 gallons,
hmm
did you go, was your next upgrade this one?
So no, I went from that E260, and when we moved out of that duplex, my stepdad and I had some issues. His hand slipped or whatever, so it kind of clamshelled the outer corner of that E260 a little bit. It still held water, but it was not something that I wanted to test. So it kind of turned into a forced upgrade, and I ended up getting a Red Sea Reefer 350. So I went from the 40-gallon system to like a 90-gallon system. It was 70 gallons display, I think. And that kind of took place with the rental house. We upgraded from a duplex to a full rental house, and then when my wife and I bought this current house, um, we had the Red Sea 350 kind of in the corner off on my right side, just against the wall. But with all the space we have in this great room, I just started looking at what can I do to kind of make it something that people to look at as soon as they walk in the front door, and also kind of provide some privacy for our dining room, and divide it a little bit from the entry room and where the living room and TV are.
Okay. So you had a mishap and then you got to upgrade. Nice.
That's kind of how the first one worked. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So is this the only tank you have?
Yes, this is the only tank I have set up in the house. I have standing orders that there are to be no tanks set up in the house because of this one. But recently I may have gotten through to her a little bit, and I may be able to set something up in the garage because it's technically not in the house.
Yeah.
So a little bit of loophole, a little bit of legal loophole there to try to get something worked out with the wife and see how she supports that.
Okay. So are we talking frag tank or?
I would like for it to be a frag tank. Kind of a separate system that I keep similar parameters in to where I can frag stuff off in this display and have insurance frags or, maybe sell them back to my LFS because they're big on it and they're great to support. I mean, they've supported me since I've come up in the hobby too.
So going back to your humble beginnings, were there any like, there's so many like highs and lows in this hobby. Was there any like one event or whatever that almost made you quit?
Honestly, no. I'm gonna draw on some other experience. I have a military background. Quitting's not an option. So even if I did, like I've had little mini crashes maybe, but not like full blown tank crashes. I try to be as meticulous as I can. I understand accidents happen. Murphy's law is a legitimate thing, but I do my best to have redundant systems or to just look a little further into it or try to catch things before be very attentive. So I don't there's really been nothing that has even really gotten me close to hanging the towel, to be honest.
Okay. So what are some of those like mishaps that you think normally might cause somebody to quit, but you persevered?
I mean, overdosing, temperature spikes, power outages, just these crazy like some events are, contributed to us and us being careless or not paying attention. And some of them are just nature saying, this is going to run its course. Being in Florida, hurricanes are a thing, and there's a huge investment here now. So I've taken steps to make sure that even if we lose power, like the the inhabitants in here are taken care of. And now, I mean, the whole house is under battery backup. I mean, I'll get AC when if we lose power during the next hurricane and be able to ride out the storm, literally.
Yeah, that's I mean, always having a plan and redundancy is a lifesaver for sure. So let's move on to the actual tank now, the star of the show. Let's start from the top, your lighting, and work our way down. All right, JT, you got some pretty cool lights. Those ATIs,
Yes, they are.
what are they? The Strattons?
So these are the ATI Stratton Pro G2s that they released, I think, earlier this year.
Yeah, I have not seen those in person yet. I've only seen them on Instagram, and they look incredible. How do you like them?
I have not had a single issue with them, to be honest with you. All the presets work, in my opinion. Um, I'm able to run kind of a more full spectrum, white heavy look during the day, get all the par, good for the corals, just natural. And then I can still enjoy the fluorescent pop towards the end of the night and, see all the crazy colors of the aquapore and everything. There's no fans. They have water resistancy. They're heavy, but it's a piece of milled aluminum as the heat sink, and they do not get very hot. And I'm running two fixtures at 60% intensity. The par estimations in the app are putting it close to 900 par right at the water surface. And I'm getting about 4 to 500 where the aquapore are at 60% intensity.
Wow. So you've got two of them. What's the dimensions of your tank, the length?
So the tank is just under 5 feet long. It's 59 inches by 29 and a half inches wide and 23.6 inches tall.
So you got pretty good light coverage on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I see quite a few interesting coral in there. Is there anything that like is special to you? Like, do you have a favorite?
Honestly, my favorite coral is just the one that's healthy and doing well. There's a couple in here that are a little more prominent than others. I know the green slimer is a cult classic, so to speak, and it stands out because it's very bright in this tank. But there's a pretty large. It's hard to get on camera very well. There's like a purple tabling kind of acropora over here, straight back, and that was given to me by a friend as a bank piece to keep safe because he had to break his tank down. Um, and so I had a frag of it that's in a different part of the tank that's growing like a weed. And then he ended up giving me the mother colony to bank and just keep in this tank. And that, so that holds some regard for that piece because it's interesting because it's very, very deep purple. It does not show up well in heavy blue. It shows up phenomenal in white light and has kind of like these orange polyps and white tips in person. So he's kind of like, hey, JT, if I give you this piece, I know it's going to be okay. Which, I mean, that speaks to me a little bit that, that there's some local people that trust me to keep stuff, keep their cherished pieces alive and be able to give them frags back or whatever they want back when they're able to get back in.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. It's good to have friends, that's for sure. Are you a fish or a coral guy?
It's I think I'm still asking myself that question because I love the color of the coral. I love the growth patterns. I love watching the organism grow, but I love the motion that the fish provide in a predominantly SPS dominated tank. I've got a ton of tangs in here. I love tangs. I love their personalities. I have a powder brown and a powder blue in here that, they get chippy with each other every now and then.
Yeah, no, that's fair. If you ask me, you sound like you lean more towards fish. I personally am more of a fish person. To me, coral a decoration. I like keeping fish. There's a lot of people who prefer coral to, collect and grow coral, and then they have their fish to do the work of keeping the tank clean. So, there's space for both. I'm a fish guy though.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think I probably lean a little bit more towards the fish because I'm the same way with names. I unless it's like an OG name that's been established forever, I can't remember it.
Speaking on fish, do you have a particular favorite?
My favorite right now is the gem tang and the blonde naso. To kind of start off, everyone loves the clownfish. Everyone loves just the classics, right? I've got this. I guess you could call it a Goniapora garden with a bunch of different strains. There's just a regular pink one. I fed the tank earlier, so they're kind of retracted a little bit and maybe a little pissed off because the clownfish love to be hosted by them. But some notable ones is the candy apple. I think that's an ACI piece.
Wow.
Then you have the blood moon Goniapora. That's kind of cool because it's got like no steel blue base with like red in the centers there. Um, it's tough to capture it in this light, but where the black ocellaris is a sweet tart Goniapora that I got from another reefer that sent it over to me, and that thing has been taken off and just growing like a weed. Kind of shifting over. This is I got this as a hammer bouquet. It started off with three different color morphs of hammer coral. One of them got choked out. It was kind of more of a peach one. So I've got like kind of this subdued, say like green teal with like a traditional like purple and green. They're kind of all fused together at the base.
Okay, I was gonna ask, is that like grafted or did you just plant them close and they kind of grew into each other?
So I I actually bought it like this from my local fish store, and what they did is they fragged skeletons from different color morphs and they glued them together. I think at this point you could consider them grafted because they've fused into one massive skeleton. Um, but I think the term that they've been using is bouquet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then kind of panning over here, just a regular frog spawn coral that I got from a local is actually my my dad's neighbor that I work with gave me that piece in exchange for some other ones. Like his dad was big into reefing before, and he was trying to take his tank and make it a little more modern. So he had to cut this massive frog spawn colony that was maybe the size of like two volleyballs, took up the entire tank, and just got a massive piece of that.
Wow, so that's a frag we're looking at.
Yeah, it was a frag. Yeah, and I mean, like I think it would be safe to say like when it was all together, it was probably the size of this rock.
Wow.
It was
So
absolutely huge.
Is that where your clown tends to host there?
Um, they really like it's this whole front domain that I've pointed out so far is kind of their where they are. They'll ignore the anemone that's up there. I just got as kind of a token thing. Um, they'll kind of show some attention to the frog spawn here, like the females is doing right now, but they'll typically stick with the hammer and they'll stay over by the Goniopora.
What is that big, I guess, red SPS back there?
This is actually um, the Manila Spy, the ACI Manila Spy. It is a type of Montipora I got as a very small frag, and you can see how the skeleton started down here and it's gradually grown and grown, and I've fragged it and kind of moved it to situate it in this nook. So I don't know if this specific one came from Jake Adams' tank. I can't say that, but I know that Jake Adams had the Manila Spy at the studio before he passed. So it's a pretty cool coral to like have this like the same species grow in my tank, and you know you can see from it how it's it's very bright. It's a happy coral. It makes me happy.
So, okay, so if we were to go to that side, right? What was that below it?
So on this side,
Yeah, just below that.
so this is an elegance coral that I got from my LFS that I really go to, and that actually I was always warned against fragging elegance corals because they would never kind of take two. This one has a fragged skeleton, but it's grown from one mouth to you can't really see it right now because all the tentacles are out. It's happy. But it's actually got three, and I think it's growing a fourth right now. I think I've had that for a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Oh, so that's what, since almost the beginning of the tank? Is that one of the first in?
This tank, yeah, I believe I had it in the other in the Red Sea tank that I had initially. I can't remember. It's a little fuzzy.
So you got kind of a mix of SPS, LPS there, huh?
Yes, I personally like the SPS. Um, my wife likes to see the movement. She likes the flowy corals.
Yeah.
So, you know, to keep her invested and to keep her like looking at the tank too, kind of meet in the middle a little bit. And I do show some love to the LPS corals that have the movement that she looks for
Right. Yeah, no, happy wife, happy life. I get it.
for sure.
Those greens are like neon, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been really showing out lately.
So what is that up there? What are we behind the Jake Adams coral?
Are we talking about kind of the tabling one here, or are we looking at like more of the staghorn there or the green below it?
The green, the really intense green.
So I think that is a hornbread corals monster booby acropora, I think. I got it from the vendor's called Reef Eco. His real name is Peter, and I got a pretty big frag pack from him. He's kind of starting out on the vendor side. Gave him a shot and got that because it kind of has a pretty cool like stubby growth pattern, and it's bright green as we're seeing here. Green can be overdone pretty quick, but there's just something about bright corals, bright green corals that stick out. You know,
Yeah, definitely. Especially when they're that almost like neon, it's pretty impressive.
appreciate that.
And then like if you were to go straight up to the top, what's that sitting like at the top of the mountain there?
So I don't have the name of this one, but this one's a storied piece. I've got a buddy who also got into law enforcement, and before that, he worked at the local fish store. Still does some time at the local fish store. He was tearing his tank down. He called to me and was like, "Hey, I have this mother colony. Can you put it in your tank and just bank it for me? Like let it grow. And one day when I get my tank set up, like I'd like a frag of it." So he gave me this monstrous mother colony, and it felt it deserving of extra attention just because it was, the fact that he trusts me that if, putting this coral in this tank that it's going to survive, that says a lot. So I wanted to give it some extra care and showcase it like at the top of the reef.
Yeah, that seems a very fitting place. And your flame hawk there seems to really like it.
Those fish are so interesting, man. Like, I know we're talking coral right now, but it's almost like they're judging you, when they perch on the rock and they're like watching you around the tank. It's funny. They're so observant.
Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy. I mean, a lot of like my family, extended family doesn't get it, but yeah, it's pretty wild how much personality a fish can have. Wait, sorry, what's
Right.
that?
So I don't know what kind of chalice that is, but it is a chalice coral. It is not happy right now, to be totally honest. The um the yellow is supposed to be blue, and the orange is supposed to be red, and the mouths are supposed to be yellow. Um, I don't know if it's a nutrient thing or if it's a light thing, to be honest. But that is not the coloration that I'm looking for in that. But it's still alive. It's still growing. It's just not the color that I'm looking for.
That's interesting. So, what do you suspect it's a nutrient thing? Have you done like have you changed any parameters?
No, I keep them in the. I mean, I probably run my phosphates a little higher than a lot of other SPS keepers, to be honest. Um, there's differing opinions with nutrient levels and stuff like that. There hasn't really been anything like glaringly different. Maybe it's trace elements, um, maybe it's a light issue, like I said, I don't, or just different light. I'm not sure. It's the fun thing about the hobby is you get to try to narrow stuff down and figure out why some things look certain ways.
Yeah, and it's interesting how big of a role light can play. I've heard of things, being one color at the store, and then you bring it home, and in a few weeks, it's a completely different color. Um,
Right.
so have you tried moving it or maybe shading it somehow?
Um, that would be my next step. I would have to frag it because it's encrusting on the rock. It's not really in a plate. It's been there for since this tank's been actually before this tank was set up. It was on this rock in my old tank. So I would actually have to break it off and then try to experiment in a different spot. It's held this spot for years.
How does it put out stingers at night?
I have never seen it do that. I know chalices can and do, depend if they're encroaching on something, but the other acropora that are around above it and beside it don't show evidence of being stung. So I would say no.
Okay. So then I guess it'll be interesting, time will tell if those acros grow out and kind of cast some shade over it, how it's going to react. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping is get some tablers over it to shade it a little bit, see if it gets back to its color.
I see you got some like small frags around there. Obviously, they're newer.
Yeah, a little newer. They're putting out uh some good some good bases right now. I had just moved that single branch stag from a different spot because it wasn't too happy of where it was. I changed up my flow a little bit, and I felt that it would contrast the organ tort that's on the other side pretty well. So that's a new spot for that single head, but the one where you can kind of see three coming out. I got that at Wrap maybe 2 years ago, and it kind of went dormant for a little bit, but it started to encrust out, throw a base out a lot more, and then you can actually see some of the coralites on the edges growing, um, from closer in, which is pretty cool.
Okay, if we keep moving closer or towards the back of the tank
Mhm.
and down. What do we got there? Ooh, is that like a staghorn there?
So this purple coral is the initial frag I got from my friend before he gifted me the mother colony, and that's what the frag has done since getting that. So it's
Oh, wow.
growing very well. You can see a lot of growth out of the base, a lot of growth from kind of the main stack and some spots where I had fragged off. And then kind of moving down, we got a branching cyphastria, which is just the growth pattern on this thing is just so cool. especially up close. I don't know if the camera really captures it, but like in person, just kind of seeing how all the mouths are is mesmerizing.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. They're kind of like all in different directions, and are they like an orange red? Am I seeing that correctly?
So it's kind of like I don't know, like the mouths are pink and the body is in some light it's green, in some light it's like more of a gray.
Okay.
But again, and then kind of an experiment is I have one here and I have one in a different spot of the tank, and it's a lot more pink exposed to more light.
Yeah. I see that sea urchin hiding under that rock. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. They those are the workers. Well, I mean between the tangs, the urchins, the snails I've got in here. I mean I do have to get in here and scrub every now and then. I do have to scrape the glass, but they uh they do most of the heavy lifting for me.
And that copper butterfly, is he taking care of that aptasia?
Everyone, like every single one except two that are really big. Um, I keep telling myself that I'm going to do something about them just because I know they're popping babies out. But at the same time, you can see back there as he ignores it and kind of hangs out next to it.
Wow, that is, yeah, that is big.
Is a big one. But you know, I feel like if we get in too much and do too much, um, we're disrupting the balance, like the ecosystem. So it's there. It's not. I don't have a outbreak. I don't have an overpopulation. Um, so I just kind of leave it alone. Like I know it's there. It is what it is.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, if it ain't hurting anything, that there's no point, right? And is he eating only aptasia, or do you have him eating frozen?
So this one, I did have him eating frozen foods. But I kind of noticed that like lately that he wasn't competing for food as much in the water column because I had him eating out of the water column, which was awesome. Um, and he kind of resorted to just picking at the rocks and wasn't super competitive to the other fish. So I kind of reintroduced more frozen, and I got a like a feeding station to where only he can get into, and I'm hoping to condition him better to that to eat from that.
I just want to point out real quick that I know you had mentioned that you mixed like your own sand, but that shot that you have right now, that is the most natural. I mean, I guess I can't say I've seen everyone's tank, but just the way it goes from like one type of sand to like rocks and pebbles on the floor, on the base, it looks really good, really natural.
I appreciate it. That's exactly what I was going for.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. There's like clearings, and then it gets, it's really nice. I really dig it rather than just being one continuous grain size throughout. So you got some, what is that? Or is that like was it Tonga branch at the top, the your live rock?
Yeah, so that's it's not actually from Tonga. It's a real reef branch rock that I added in here.
Oh yeah, I've seen them. That's pretty cool.
'Cause it's great. They're great to stick acropore at the end of, and you know, let them have their space, but you can kind of pack them a little tighter at the same time.
I see. Yeah, and I keep seeing the fish dip like in the middle. There's like cave work there or something.
Yes. If we go to the other side, you'll see it. I because I included the real reef like turbinaria rock that actually looks like a scrolling, like an old dead scrolling coral. That offers a lot of little hiding places, and the gems kind of peeking out from under it right now, kind of through this little opening.
Your Talbots there, those are some cool fish.
Alberts have been awesome. The adding the Bartlett's Anthias has like been so freaking awesome. I added six. I had three of the lyre tail Anthias, one male, two females. Just added this group of six Bartletts, and they've grouped up together. I haven't lost one, knock on wood, and there's not like a ton of aggression, if any, from the uh the other lyre tails. Sometimes the male will, put him, set him in line, which you might see here. He's doing with his others, but nothing that's like over the top crazy.
Yeah, I mean they've got a lot of nice room and places to hide. So it seems like aggression is not really an issue in your tank in general.
Very blessed for that. Very blessed.
So yeah, let's do you have anything that stands out to you on this side?
I honestly call this side the forgotten side because this isn't really what people are looking at when they come in the room. This is on the dining room side of the house. Like this, I would like to do more. I'd like to kind of fill this shelf and maybe do a bunch of like micromusa or something like that to fill this and maybe give something a little different from just like from Aquapora. Maybe something a little low light, but I haven't decided on that. I will point out this right here is was a frag of the ACI Crystal Experiment, which is another strain that Jake Adams had in the Reef Builder studio that I've got growing on this side next to the branching Cyphastria. So that's kind of a little signature piece too, if you will. Cool having a piece of like what he had in the reef, just like I said with the Manila Spy.
Yeah, yeah, he definitely had a lot of great tanks and a lot of knowledge over the years. Wow, is that a green slimer?
That is a green slimer, front and center.
Cool. Yeah, see, I'm terrible with the names. I just like what I like. It's usually very low end, but I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but I mean, this one's a classic. Uh, if you were to ask me a majority of the names of what I have, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but there's some in here that kind of have the lineage, that it's easier for me to keep track of. You talk about personality of the Naso, there we go. Or I
Yeah.
come over and say hi to his drive by.
What's the foundation of your rock? Like, because you have a lot of like overhangs and flat pieces.
The large structure that's kind of the mountain is the Carib Sea Life Rock bundle. So there's a fiberglass rod that goes down the center and you kind of stack them. And then the base here that kind of runs along is cemented aquaforest rock mixed in with some Carib Sea arches. And that's like the flat pieces and everything here. But it tapers over, it connects on the other side. There's another arch that connects on this side that works down here. And then I was able to take more of the branch rock pieces and kind of fill the gap to where they are supported by the life rock tree, but they are branching over the aquaforest rock that I had started with initially.
Yeah, I have to say you did a really good job with the aquascaping. It's very visually interesting and but yet looks so natural at the same time. I really dig it.
That's probably the hardest thing is figuring out the aquascape and like settling on something.
It really is because you can go too simple where it just looks like a bunch of stacked rocks, or you can get. I'm not a fan of like the too many arches because it's just not something you would see in reality. With like
Right.
huge, it almost looks like a bunch of tree roots instead of natural like reef structure, which should be
Right.
mostly solid.
Hmm.
But I think you struck a nice balance there. So on this side, I see you got some zoas. Are those recordias there?
No, so those are actually more Cyphastria, but these are an encrusting type of Cyphastria in different locations. This one's got
Okay.
to be my favorite right now. I don't know the name of it, but it's cool because it's like the skin's orange and the polyps are more of a peach. And you can actually see them move along. And then I've got this center. It's kind of like a meteor shower, Cyphastria on the back. I'm more of a classic. And then this weird red one. It's like with the white mouths. It's just different. And then,
Well, before I get flamed by the internet, from my view, the image quality is a lot lower than it will be. So all the polyps on to me look like recordia polyps. They
okay.
have like little
Yeah,
bubbles.
yeah, yeah.
That's what I was seeing. But it's just because the software records in a lower quality initially.
Well, I mean, for looking at my screen on this side, I agree with you. Like looking at what maybe you see does look like it could be, Recordia mushrooms. So, I will back you on that initial classification too, because like I see it looking through my little lens.
Sweet. All
So
right.
I'll vouch for you. I'll go to bat for you. It's all good.
Nice. Thank you. So, all right, what's that up there? That super green piece just above the zoas?
I think that is an ORA green planet that I've had for a very long time that went dormant for a little bit because I was pissing the tank off. And then I just kind of left it alone and kept it there. And it's gotten very, very green, very, very good polyp extension. I'm not sure if you can see that from here, but it's different. It's a different green than the green Slimer. It's deeper. It's not all the same shade. I
Right.
think it looks pretty interesting right there. Well, again, I think the biggest thing is like contrasting colors as much as you can. Like if you have a bunch of different shades of green next to each other, they're not going to stand out. But if you have them amongst other colors or complementing colors, they pop quite a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. The color wheel is a pretty exact science. So, contrasting colors definitely help each other stand out. But I think, yeah, again, look, it's weird, right? I am so drawn to your sand bed. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. But you have these natural, almost trails. They're reminiscent of like hiking trails, honestly, where you have these larger rocks, usually to the outside, and then in the middle is more of the finer sand.
There's some people that'll give me a hard time for what I did or what I paid for, but what I've seen recently is I got rid of my MP60s in favor of these Pantarai ECM 42s, which are very, very expensive. Like that hurt the wallet a lot, right?
Yeah.
But I have them on a wave mode, on a pulsing, and they're offset a little bit. It's not a full anti-sync, but they're offset. And
Right.
you can kind of see, at least from my point of view, is the substrate, how it dips along the length of the tank is kind of reminiscent of the the wave pattern, the oscillation.
Oh,
So
right.
I
Yeah.
think because there's natural flow in here, it's helping shape the way the substrate looks. It's keeping the substrate clean, but it may be helping that natural look that you were talking about with almost like trails and how the larger particles or the larger pieces of substrate are out and they're not being moved, and then the finer pieces are closer underneath the overhangs and under the rock structure.
Yeah. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I dig the natural look more than anything. Oh, wow. So you have a clam also.
I have two. I have this Durasa down here that was gifted by a friend of mine that had to move out of state and wanted wanted this in good hands. He had it for 5 or 6 years before I got it, so he gifted me that to keep safe. And then I have a Maxima that's hidden up by the large purple acropora that was also given by a different friend, but same local fish store.
Yeah, they're and they're at pretty different levels, height levels.
Yes, yes. So the Durasa are they like sand substrate. They're sand dwelling clams. Um, and the Crocea and the Maximas are rock dwelling. And you can find Maximas in the wild at very, very, very shallow pools. So to kind of keep in line with what you would find, I have that up in the reef structure, closer to the light. Yeah, very happy with that one. And then I think the Talbots, you can actually kind of see a hole between the Cyphastria and the back of that clam. I think the Talbots kind of took refuge and used the underside of this rock as their burrow, so to speak. I
Uh,
just saw one popping out not too long ago.
So looks like you got it. Is that a Monty cap?
Yeah, it's just a regular red Monty cap that grows like a weed that I've reset at least 4 times.
You see, this is a perfect example. It's such a common everyday coral, and it's honestly one of my favorites.
It's
That
just bright.
yeah, the color. Like every time I see them, they look great. Oh, so what's that? What do you got on top of the Monty cap?
So the other Monty or the core the acropora.
It looks like an aquapora.
So that is a maricultured Bali piece. There's no name. I got it from my LFS. Is they import these and they sell them by the mini colony. They don't cut them up. They don't like it's not a chop shop, but they bring these in, and there's certain ones that they run relatively inexpensive for what they are because they're wild, and you got to dip them a little bit more, and they're a little more susceptible to mortality because they're coming from a mariculture facility, but it's kind of like there's some of them that just have that potential. Like this one, it's very, it's kind of dull in this light, in this color temperature, but it's different than everything else.
Yeah, well, it stands out for sure. It caught my attention.
So it's cool, and it came with an acro crab in it. So there's a beneficial acro crab that's living in that little colony too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So for your circulation there, you have the two panther rays.
Mhm.
You have what looks like uh are those your returns?
Yeah, so it's my two return nozzles with the VCA flow adapters.
Okay. And then you got your gyre in the middle.
So I've got a gyre in the overflow box and then an opposing gyre. So
Okay. And I assume they're dual, like opposite flows.
yeah, so I'm running the gyres through the Hydros wave engine and doing a lot of crazy flow patterns with it. I mean, just kind of a view of what the surface agitation is looking like, the current state. And right now I use the gyres to get the chaotic random flow. Um, and I'm using the Pantarize on the. I think I'm saying that right. It could be Ray. It could be Rye. I'm honestly not sure.
Honestly,
Um,
me either.
I don't know, but they are very impressive with how strong the flow is. So it's pushing water from the overflow side to the far side of the tank, and using those to just kind of push water to the far side, and then using the gyres to circulate it randomly throughout. It's kind of been my game plan with it, and I think it's working because alkalinity consumption has shot through the roof since getting those on. I'm
Nice.
struggling to keep 7 right now.
Oh wow. Oh no. So what did you replace? What was in their place? The panther rise or rays?
They were the Ecotech MP60s.
Okay. You just wanted something that would a little more oomph.
So the MP60s move a lot of water. There's no doubt about that. Having the replaceable wet sides does have its benefits. Mine ended up getting a little noisier than I liked as well, and these things are dead silent. But the flow would kind of stop like right around here, and I
Oh.
still had all this other space where it was just it was almost dead space, right? So I wanted something that when I turn the gyres off, the hammer and the frog spawn would still get influenced by the flow, right? So that was kind of my push and my reasoning to do the ECM 42s. And I can also shout out my buddy Terrell that runs Putang Reefs, because when I went over to pick up coral from him, he had the big ECM 63 on his main SPS display. And that thing is huge, but it's impressive. And the flow that he was pushing in this like 8 foot, 9 foot peninsula that he's got was kind of open up my perspective a little bit. And when him and I got to talking, um, the 63s would be too much for this tank, but the 42s turned out to be the perfect thing. So we talked about it. I kind of pulled the trigger on it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's awesome. So let's pivot now. Let's check out some of your gear.
You want to see sump gear? Do you want to see what the control board looks like?
Yeah, let's start in the sump and then move to the gizmos and electronics. That is an impressive sump area. What actually came with the tank?
The sump and the tank were one package deal, obviously, for the system, for the Cade system, but nothing. I added all this over the course of figuring out how I wanted my method, my reefing method to work.
Okay, so just for anyone who would be listening and not watching, you have the sump came with the Cade. So how many chambers is the actual sump? Is that glass, by the way?
It's a glass sump. Over here on my right in front of me is the designated ATO chamber built into the sump, which is, I think, 19 gallons, what Cade says. So the water comes in from this side, works down. There's factory filter socks that sit over here. I had removed those because I went with the roller mat and I wanted the roller filter. Then the water kind of works in a raceway to the back side of the sump, goes through where Cade has a refugium section, an equipment section, and then there's another like plastic basket section where you can drop media with the Cade before it goes into the return section, which is on the back side of where the water comes in. So it works in a U around from near up around to backside.
And that's a Red Sea roller mat. Is that I know they have like two, right? Is that the bigger one or the
I
smaller
think
one?
they have three now because there's a nano one, but this is the big one. This is the 1200.
Okay. And so from the roller mat to your skimmer, what kind of skimmer is that?
So this is a Reef Octopus Elite 200 internal.
How do you like it?
This thing is a workhorse. I love it. It's you keep up on the maintenance, you clean it the way you should, and it keeps working. Now I have it hooked up directly to the hydros, so it's completely controlled with level sensor and everything through my hydros controller. So if the sensor gets tripped, it cuts the pump off. I get a notification on my phone, skimmer sensor level.
All right. So you got next to your skimmer, there's some type of reactors.
So space is a premium. So I actually have some of my reactors in the ATO section, which may be a little wild to some, but again, being meticulous about stuff and double checking things, it's worked to me so far. This is actually in a vast marine ozone reactor. It's called the Mutiny, and a lot of other methods of injecting ozone into the system use the skimmer, which can lower the effectiveness of the skimmer. I decided to try out this reactor, and it uses an air pump, the ozone reactor itself, and a recirculating pump. So it is all contained in this unit. It sends the water to a carbon filter that's on the backside. So it gets all that ozone smell out and then works back into the tank that way. So I'm still ozonating the water, don't have that ozone smell in the house, and it keeps my water crystal clear.
Nice. Yeah. One thing I did notice is how absolutely clear the water is in your tank. So one thing I think every reefer has is a piece of equipment that they swear by. What's the MVP for you?
The MVP now is I made the switch from 2-part, 3-part, and all that to a calcium reactor. And I went with a Deltec Quintec calcium reactor, which is what they call an automatic calcium reactor. There's no pH probe. There's a controller that you'll see later where I can adjust how much effluent's getting dosed into the tank, how often the reactor gets degassed, and how fast the recirculating pump is running in the reactor, all from one control panel. And all I have to do is I do my op test. If it's a little high, I can dial the amount of effluent that I'm dosing per day back, or decrease the speed of the pump so it's not running through the reactor as fast. But it opens its own solenoid to control the pH in the system based on CO2 saturation. So I don't have to do any calibration with any sort of pH probes or anything like that.
Yeah. I personally have never interacted with a calcium reactor. I've only done dosing, and I tried kalkwasser, but I don't know. I had more success with just dosing.
But when the demand's up there, it's much easier.
So you have quite a collection of equipment. Now, on the flip side, any one piece of equipment that you feel you could have done without?
I think when I went through the iteration of trying refugium in the sump and all the equipment associated with refugium in the sump, I think that was probably something that I could have done without. I tried an algae turf scrubber, which just took up a bunch of space. That was probably something I could have done without. I mean, they worked for what they did. It's just kind of had to pick and choose and prioritize how this equipment is organized and how it's laid out in the sump because space is such a hot commodity.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So, what do you do for maintenance? Like, what's your schedule? What, are you a water change guy? Or are you one of those no water changes?
I am the very opposite of no water changes. I when I started putting this tank together, I wanted it as semi-automatic as possible because I'm obviously still getting in here. I'm still doing maintenance. I'm still cleaning. I like my sump to be clean. I don't like all that film and everything. But my daughter had just been born kind of right at the time this was happening, right? And I want to spend as much time with her as she's growing up, but still be able to have like my finger on the pulse of the tank, but it kind of runs itself. So I have auto water changes set up, and I had initially had a GHL Maxi pump run in the early hours of the morning to do the water change. It's pulling from the saltwater vat in the garage and it's pushing the wastewater back out into a sink. More recently, to kind of cut down on the heat generated from just very fast or the roller heads moving very fast and building up all that wear and tear and just like hot to the unit's hot to the touch. I'm experimenting with running it continuous throughout the day at 12 milliliters a minute. So I just make sure that my saltwater vat is at the level it needs to be. That the salinity is the correct way. I have it as sealed as I can. And, every minute, 12 milliliters of this tank is going out and fresh salt water is coming in.
I think the idea of this continuous water change is newer in the sense of like ever since like automation has really gotten pretty wild. Like you can automate you can make it as complicated and as crazy as you want. Or, I mean, there's people that still just do everything manually, which I personally don't have the discipline for.
I think striking that balance is very important because if it's too automated, then besides looking at your tank, you don't know what's going on. But if you are verifying that automation continuously on a schedule, I think that's kind of that's where I like to be.
This hobby is notorious for teaching patience, right? You strike me as a very patient person having a military background. I'm sure that's your default. Was there a specific failure or crash that taught you the most, or any one point that has taught you like, a very valuable lesson in this hobby?
I was using a specific company's trace elements and the specific ICP that this company had recommended at the time that was very accessible to me in Florida. The iodine content in this specific trace element solution was much higher than what my system needed. I could have gone through and individually added the elements that I needed as to this stock solution that I would use a month at a time. The component with the high iodine was recommended for tanks running a macroalgae reactor or refugium, which I was at the time. And that coupled with the company's ICP not reading iodine correctly, I had like toxic levels of iodine in the tank, which I think is the reason that my gem tank has his head and lateral line erosion problem. Because when I started using that regimen with that ICP, that's when I started to notice that erosion. And I switched ICP companies and I do not use that trace element solution anymore and kind of do things a little bit different. And it's been some time, but I'm starting to see healed tissue on my gem tank's face. So, I mean, it's kind of seeing proof that the high iodine exposure was a reason for a lot of coral mortalities, was directly affecting the health of the fish and everything. So that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned with this specific system was double check things.
Yeah, and that goes back to redundancy, which is in all aspects is always a safe bet. So now let's move on to you're not an Apex guy, you're running the Hydros. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Let's check out your Hydro setup.
So it's actually set in two parts. I have kind of a like nice looking controller board here that the Cade provides, and most of the hydro spraying is behind this.
Okay, so just for describe it, you have a panel at the bottom of the Cade, which is sitting just behind your sump area. Is that correct?
Yes. So the Cade includes an electronics cabinet and then a dry cabinet on the other side where you can put like a chiller or put dosing equipment or whatever the case is. And they include these power strips built into this false wall. So you can mount your controllers to it. You can, customize. Like I got a 3-inch hole saw because I was noticing electronics with a lot of wires, they get hot. And I didn't want to have overheating issues or anything. So I actually put a 3-inch hole in it and got one of the Reef Octopus fans that has a thermostat built in. And I put this louvered vent on it, and I'm pulling cool air into this electronics cabinet to keep things, kind of a little colder than they would be without ventilation. So I have the Hydros launch system up here. I have the XP8 here. Over in this back right corner is the Wave engine, and that's all the Hydros gear in this specific cabinet. But here on the right that I'm pointing to are the power strips that are included with the Cade.
Yeah, so essentially it's a built-in power distribution, like a power strip,
Yes.
but
Yep.
bigger. And that one plug you plug into the wall, and into the power strip you're able to plug in all your controllers and etc. Yeah, very nice. I always like the glow of the Hydros. Like they took it to a different level. I mean, Apex has always been the standard for sure, but I like the Hydros. I'm leaning towards that brand for controllers and automation.
I like how if something's wrong in this tank, not only is it beeping at me audibly, it's giving me notifications on my phone, and these lights are flashing red. So there are visual cues, there are push notification cues, and there are audible cues right off the bat. Nothing else needs to be added to it.
Okay. So how are you dosing Kalkwasser?
So I dose a flat 3 liters a day. That's just under what my tank evaporates. Like that never changes. I will dial the calcium reactor down if the out consumption decreases for whatever reason. The calc always stays the same. And that's pulling fresh water from the ATO into the stir and then into the tank. So it's not like it's pulling from a different unlimited source. It's pulling from, if it does overdose or whatever the case is, the dosing pump fails. It's not something that will just flat out nuke the tank.
So is that your calc stir, is that a part of your ATO, or is it separate? It's just continuously dosing?
So no, I wasn't able to with the Hydros dosers I have. It's not set up to do a continuous dose. So I just split the doses up over a 24-hour period and set that I want 3,000 milliliters or 3 liters to dispense throughout a 24-hour period. And so every 30 minutes, it doses what it needs to attain that daily.
And that's in addition to just a regular RODI auto top-offs?
Yeah, so it'll dose that. Like I said, I calculated the 3,000 milliliters is less than what my tank will evaporate in a day. So I'm still getting fresh top off water. I still have an ATO. It's being fed from the same thing. So it's not like if it evaporates more because even if we reach the 3,000 milliliter threshold, like I'm still gonna be dosing fresh water into the tank to keep the salinity where it needs to be, where the level is going to be.
I get it. So your Kalkwasser basically doses the amount that you set, and then the difference
Is taken care of by the ATO. Yes.
Wow. That's one of the things that's always worried me about dosing calc was the calculation. It's so like based on your individual tank and your needs. It's worth taking the time to figure out, and it constantly monitoring, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, just having that pH benefit with injecting like a bunch of CO2 into the tank uh, is important because a lot of the calcium reactor only systems run suppressed pH. They're running like maybe 7, 8, maybe 8, maybe hitting peaks at 8 during the day and everything, unless they're running refugium too. But just dosing the 3 liters of calc and adjusting the amount of effluent I dose with the calcium reactor, I'm seeing pH lows of 8.1 and pH highs of 8.3 during the day, which is exactly where we want to be.
Yeah, that's great. Seems like you got it pretty dialed in.
I'm pulling in fresh air from outside through a carbon filter directly into the skimmer, running the calc washer.
By Outside, you mean outside the tank, right? Or the sump area?
outside the house.
Ooh, do you have it, like, plumbed outside of the house?
So I have an airline that runs from outside the house to the tank into the inlet of the skimmer. So this house has four people, three adults, a kid, and three dogs. So there's a lot of CO2 in this house. It's insulated very well. So by me pulling the fresh air from outside, I'm able to introduce more oxygen in the tank. So we're not dealing with the abundance of CO2 in the system that depresses the pH.
Wow, that's awesome. Maybe that's a thing. I've never seen that before. That's really cool. Also, my tank is against an exterior wall, so that might be something I do.
That might be an option for you.
JT, where do you see this tank going in the next year? Like, do you have any big plans or anything?
There's no big plans. I just want it to grow out. I've done. I think I've done what I needed to get this under cruise control, and I'm just enjoying watching the corals and the fish mature.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing an amazing job. Are you adding more corals or are you just sticking with what's there?
I think I'm about done with Acropora unless I get some really special pieces. I'm not opposed to adding some other maybe LPS corals or maybe zoanthids, chalice type corals, just to kind of fill in some of the rock space down lower. But as far as real estate up top, where the acros are able to table out and everything, I think I'm about done.
All right, so I like to try and do this lightning round, which is just quick questions that should be a breeze. We kind of already touched on it. Are you fish or coral?
Based on your thing, I'd say fish.
SPS, LPS, or softies?
SPS.
If you could magically have any fish, regardless of tank size or compatibility and whatnot, if there was zero risk, what would it be? What's your dream fish?
I would say an Achilles tank.
Ooh, that's a good one. And I had the question, manual water changes or automation, but clearly you went with automation, right?
Automation. Unless there's something that's so out of whack that I need to do a manual water change, auto water changes.
Nice. JT, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and your reef. Where can people follow you or if they have any questions or want to reach out, where should they do that?
Let me touch on your first thing. Thank you for having me. This has been a new thing for me. Just to get in front of a camera and talk. It's not really my forte, but I appreciate you being patient with me and taking the time. So thank you. But as far as where you can find me, I'm most active on Instagram under the handle Hardy_Reef.
All right, man. Later.